Marley, first off, thank you for your time today, man. I love what you guys are building over at Momentous, and it's been incredible getting to know you and also the team, and excited to hear more about the developments and the future of the company. But I want to first start by talking about what drew you to this intersection of sports and real estate. Walk us through that process. Was it like a single project? Was it a market shift? Like, what did you notice that made you want to get into this space?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. A big fan, first time caller in. Appreciate everything you do for the sports community, man. And I mean that. Sports, that's interesting. So unlike most of my peers here at Momentous and a lot of our partners, did not play professional or collegiate sports. I played golf as a young man, and I'm worse now than I was when I was 11. But I was always surrounded with sports and always kind of hung out in those communities. And then as an investor here over the last 5, 6, 7 years, we started seeing sports deals. I guess it was probably about 2017, 2018. And all varieties, everything from venture to teams to the real estate. And we're big, we'll talk about it here in a little bit, but we're big real estate folks at our core. But when we started seeing sports deals a handful of years ago, it was mostly of the vanilla kind. It was in a team, it was a sports tech, hardware, software, things like that. And so we saw what was happening in sports. There was rumblings at that point about what was happening with private equity and the admittance of private equity into sports. And so we started taking bets a number of years ago, really with the emphasis to educate ourselves and start building a core thesis like we've done now at Momentous and where we wanted to play. You know me a little bit. We like to play different and complex sometimes, and that's usually where we find the biggest yield and delta. So we found an interesting lane, but I'm not an athlete. I've been surrounded with great athletes. We've got great partners like John Elway and Tim Tebow and guys that have played the game at the highest level. And then we're surrounded, and my background is more on the institutional finance and real estate side. And so pairing those two things together with the competitive nature of some of my partners internally and externally, and then just the institutional nature has been a lot of fun. It's definitely a fun asset class to be involved with.
I love it, man. And when you look at sports through that lens of real estate, what do you guys see over at Momentus that you feel like most people in the industry tend to miss?
So it's interesting. So I built my entire career initially on the institutional side, institutional finance, institutional real estate, and I've gotten to see how those organizations, which are phenomenal organizations, think, operate, and are a lot of the time siloed. And so they're very creative. Some of them are creative, some of them are very traditional and not creative, and like to do things that are very simple but make good money, like, multifamily housing or whatever, like just down the fairway type of investments. And then there's some that are very creative. But common through most of them is the fact that if they have two or three sides of the business, they fight for resources and attention. And so from the real estate side to the traditional private equity side to the other sides of the business, even though they're all under the same umbrella, they're siloed and they think differently and they fight for resources. Us here off of our balance sheet with our partners on the family office side, we can think very patiently, very collaboratively, and think just a little bit different. So when we were surveying what other folks were doing here, we did a lot of research and did investments to find out that we want to be in both teams and real estate. Again, real estate's our core background. And what's happening is, I grew up going to the local regional mall back in, the 80s and 90s where you hung out with your buddies and your friends on a Friday night and went to the movies and kind of went into the shops. That doesn't exist for this generation. And so what we've seen is a displacement of that place, not just for teenagers, but for everyone to come together and have different experiences, but shared experiences. And there's nothing better than sports. And so the Battery, who are very close with the folks up in Atlanta, are kind of the preeminent prototype here. But really creating, maybe it's a bad example, but it's recreating the regional mall that was so much a focal point of these communities in the 70s, 80s, and 90s and doesn't exist anymore. We're in the modern era now where that's different. And a lot of times in the vision that we have is that is crystallized and catalyzed by sports at its center, but has so many appendages around it that is for everybody. So if you're not a sports fan, you're still going to the Battery up in Atlanta because you're going to some of the great restaurants or some of the great retail or some of the concerts and things like that. And so that is the new vision that is happening, but hasn't really taken off in a meaningful way. And there's so much opportunity, and that's really the focus of what we're doing.
You mentioned the Battery, and I definitely want to get to that and what some other organizations are doing when it comes to mixed use venues. But when you think about sports anchored real estate, What are you guys most focused on? Is it that mixed use side? Is it more like training facilities or other areas of real estate? Because real estate can kind of be a broad term when you think about it.
Yeah. No, I mean, every city is different, whether you're working in Columbus, Ohio, or Charleston, South Carolina, or Jacksonville, Florida, or other, there's existing projects in those communities, some good, some not good, some that need improvement. They have different sports teams, but when you ask about the types of real estate, it's really geography and municipality dependent. What does Jacksonville need right now outside of, sports as the anchor? Do they need more premium multifamily? Do they need more affordable multifamily apartments? Do they need more experiential retail as opposed to kind of the big box traditional corporate retail, more smaller and mid-sized businesses that are really, like I don't necessarily go to the Cheesecake Factory, nothing against Cheesecake Factory. I'd rather go to the small and medium-sized great restaurants that have one or two locations. Maybe there's not that or a place to go for those people to afford to go into the community. But on a prototypical level, to answer your question, Malcolm, it is multifamily, it is retail, it is, the new version and definition of office, more fungible office and incubator office and entrepreneurial type of office. It's medical office. And then it's also you mentioned kind of the fields. It could be practice facilities. It could be recreational youth fields for that municipality. There's a lot of municipalities, especially here in the South, that are continuing to try to attract the Northerners to move down here and take all their tax base down here. And so a lot of these communities see the rec fields and the youth element as a huge value add to draw those parents and to draw those families. And so in a lot of our projects, we have plenty of room and we have the vision to master plan that into what we're doing. So it's truly, the acreage could be anywhere from 50 to 400 acres on average, what we're working on. And that can include, at a minimum, your hotel, your resi, your retail, and your office. But in a lot of circumstances, it also has obviously the stadium, but then the rec fields and other things that are purposeful for that community.
Mhm. Getting back to the Braves, and they're not an isolated, situation. We've seen the Bucks do this with Deer District, the Packers with Titletown. What lessons have you taken away from studying these other organizations and what they've been able to do with mixed use venues and kind of apply to what you guys are trying to do?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So those are all major cities with major, sports footprint and teams. And so there's only a handful of examples. Like we all use the same examples because there's not that many. We're in the first inning of it. And so I think there's definitely inspiration and good and bad to draw from each of those. As we think about what we're doing, we're typically going into what I would call more secondary, very aggressive growth markets, places like Jacksonville, Charleston, and otherwise. So you're not in necessarily LA, Atlanta, they obviously went into the northern burbs, but that's a huge metropolis. And so you've got a lot of things to consider again when you're working in those very large MSAs where we can be a little bit more creative in places like Charleston and Jacksonville because there's not a lot of existing that we don't want to replicate. But in terms of your question on inspiration, it's really about the Atlanta Braves have done such a phenomenal job with again the local restaurants, the local retailers that the thriving 365 24/7 of events for the family, for concerts, all of those different things so that it's not just the place that you go to watch the Braves. It is actually, I mean, if you look at all the studies and all the stats and the revenue, most of it comes from non-game day, non-game related events and retail and all of the same. So for us, it's really about how do we allow the local community to participate, the local businesses to participate, to be a great beacon of community engagement. But also recognizing that within commercial real estate, you've got to have some stabilizers that are large companies and otherwise. And so, we've got folks on our team that think very differently. That's core to our DNA. All of those teams do fabulous things. I'll give you one example. We have Tim Tebow on our team and Andrew Cathy and his office Four Stones. If you talk about purposeful people worried about others other than themselves, worried about other people and community impact. I don't know that, there's maybe a top 20 list that we can all think of. I think those two guys and those two foundations are toward the top of a lot of people's lists for everything that they do. And so as we go into a community and project build, I don't know what other teams are thinking about, hey, how do we incorporate the stadium so that it's as accessible as anywhere in the world for those with physical handicaps? Or how do we create a special needs hall of fame? How do we really engage the community on true community impact pieces and not just be so focused on the revenue generating real estate all the time? Of course, that's the game, but how do we really have purpose around what we're doing? And so I think I don't want to disparage any of the other ones, but I don't know of any of the other ones that truly have those types of examples. And we're going to be doing that in every single project we do.
That's incredible, man. And I'm interested to hear like how you guys identified the right partners. You mentioned Andrew Cathy, you mentioned Tim Tebow, obviously like Blake Bortles, John Elway. These are like high profile athletes, of course, but great people. So what was it like putting together this team and really formulating the right group to execute this idea?
We're people first. I know it's super cliche. We're at a phase in our life and kind of the evolution of our companies where we're very, very purposeful with who we surround ourselves with. And I came from a long time working in the Northeast and nothing against the Northeast, but I think doing business in the South and the Midwest, where I'm originally from, versus the Northeast, there's just an element that we really ingrain in our culture here as an organization about the people and doing life and business together. That's a line that we use all the time. So when you talk about John Elway, listen, John Elway was great. He was an incredible football player. But what's even better is he's such a good dude. Like he is more focused now on being a great grandfather and father to his kids and doing good in his community and making good business decisions. He doesn't have that arrogance about him that, hey, I'm John Elway. And the same is true as everyone that we work for, and they all have purpose outside of money and making money. And I just mentioned that with Tim, obviously, Tebow and Andrew Cathy and others. So you've got this really incredible group of people that come from different backgrounds, some with chips on their shoulders, like Blake Bortles, who, I'm a UCF guy. He was great for UCF. He went on and did great things for the Jaguars, almost got to them to the Super Bowl, but then, ultimately had some struggles in the NFL, like a lot of folks do. And, has a bit of a chip on his shoulders and has been a lot of people have chatted about him in the past, and he's, a great father and focused on that, but also has that drive to go out and show people what he's capable of in the business community. And so we've just surrounded ourselves with great people that are truly focused on making a difference, on being different. Um, and everyone is super active. Like a lot of these other firms, and I'm not disparaging the other firms, they might flash John Elway or Michael Strahan or whoever it is. I don't know any of those other firms where literally like John Elway, Blake Bortles, like all of these folks are on the phone with me and our team all the time. Very active. It's not like we check in once a year, we check in a quarter, and that they don't have any idea of what's going on. I mean, these people are invested, they're activated, they're engaged. So that's who we want to do life and business with.
I love it, man. That's incredible. Getting back to kind of the core focus, and you alluded to like some of the smaller market opportunities, secondary markets that you guys are kind of focused on. Do you think these markets can outperform some of these larger metro areas where there is more stuff to do, as opposed to in the secondary markets, maybe the mixed use venue or where the team, it might be the core focus of the epicenter of the community?
You hit it spot on. I mean, we've been investing in secondary markets for a long time. They've outperformed all the primary markets. Of course, New York City's been the beacon of the world for a long time, and it's, in a resurgence right now. There's a lot going on in terms of the potential mayor situation that a lot of people are, kind of scared about. But for us, we continue to love the Sun Belt, Texas, Florida, Georgia, Carolinas, Tennessee, the Midwest. And exactly right. Like, nothing against New York. I take my kids there every year before Christmas. We love it. It's got so much to do, but I don't want to try to one go compete and be the third or fourth Madison Square Garden. But you got the Barclays Center, you got Madison. You've got so many places to go, so many things to do. I want to go where there's one or zero options and truly placemaking and those growth communities where we've got great population, great demographics. People are moving there. They only have one or two teams, but they're fanatical about those teams. And you can truly catalyze the entire community through one large project. I don't know that you could do that in Newark. You can't do that in Boston. You can't do that in Chicago. And, politics aside, I've voted on both sides of the aisle as long as I could vote. And, for us, we want to be in places where it's relatively easier to do development, relatively easier to do business. We have a lot of data center exposure and a lot of other exposures. You're going to run into NIMBYism and all kinds of backlash, any asset class that you're in. But we want to do places where it's not just a political vendetta against any development, but they're very encouraged to think collaboratively and pro-business. And we find that a lot in the Sun Belt and some of the redder states and cities. And so we just happen to be in more of those places and not in the places like Philly or New York or Chicago or LA where, a project could take 20 years.
Yeah.
That's not what we're focused on.
Yeah, and to that point, like obviously in some of these bigger cities, you see the tension between ownership groups, municipalities, communities developing around stadium, and then it can create a challenging dynamic. Do you guys face any of that building in these some smaller markets, or is it much easier, more seamless process?
It's never easy, but I think it comes down to education and awareness and being a true partner with these municipalities. We're not going into the municipalities and saying, hey, we want $1 billion for a stadium. Like that just doesn't sound right. It's not the right thing to do. The right thing to do is what we've been doing, where we go into these city halls and these community meetings and we listen to what other things are happening, like I talked about earlier, where there's a community need for more, rec fields. Let's add 20 rec fields to the master plan. Or, one of the cities we're working in, they don't have a great convention space. Well, guess what? We've got plenty of options, and it would be really cool to have sports adjoined with convention. And so I think too many times developers and real estate folks just they get in their lane and they just drive and they drive and they're not as collaborative as we should. And going back, I'm trying to be humble as I say this, like we don't know what we don't know, and we try to be good people and good stewards of capital and good partners to these communities. That's our goal. When we go into these, of course, we want, we have a mission to go catalyze a team and to build a big successful real estate project, but we have to be great partners to the community. And so it's about education, awareness, and collaboration. And you're going to run into issues no matter where you go. You're going to have the people that want to save the birds and the people that want to save the trees and the people like there's always going to be that. But if you're very thoughtful and intentional about what you're building and ensuring that you have collaboration with the community, then that's a great first start.
How do you guys think about and evaluate risk in this space, whether that's like construction costs, you mentioned political factors, or even like shifts in like fan engagement? How do you guys think about, managing the downside?
So it's interesting. So risk on the sports side is an interesting question. I think we also saw through COVID and even now, you look at the viewership of the NFL and every other sport, it's spiking as much as it ever has. People want authentic live engagement. They want authentic live unscripted entertainment. And so the risk on the sports side, we have to pick the right operators, the right communities, all of that. Apparently, sports is not going anywhere. I'm not paying a ticket to go watch a robot kick a soccer ball anytime soon. So I don't think AI and some of those things are going to disrupt it. You're always going to have on the property side, the real estate side, you'll always have different issues, whether it's construction costs or tariffs or something like that. The beauty of that is, we're working on longer cycle projects where we get to experience the evolution of an entire cycle or multiple cycles. And so most of our projects, every multifamily developer, retailer, there's always something that we have to deal with. With our projects, they're multi-phase and they're longer term. And so as we have tariffs in 2024, 25, there'll be something else in 2026, but we're able to start to de-risk those over the long term as opposed to being, concentrated in one short time frame where if you hit it wrong with the tariffs and you're building your entire apartment complex in 6 months and construction costs are high and tariffs are high, well, then you're screwed. You had no way to really diversify out of that. Time here is on our side and a diversifier.
hmm You mentioned robots kicking the soccer ball, which kind of leads me to my next question of like technology. And I know you're not necessarily a tech guy, but is that something that you guys are thinking about as you conceptually think about development in real estate as well?
Yeah, so it's funny. I caught up with a buddy here in town, Greg Hill, who was pitching me hard to come into him with his initial investment into Figure AI about three or 4 years ago. Figure AI, for those that don't know, is the humanoid robot company that is gaining a lot of attention, incredible market cap. The returns on that have been enormous. And their vision is to have robots in the home and at the workplace and in the manufacturing, all kinds of things. So in terms of technology, it's not going to displace the human element of sports anytime soon that I think would disrupt this entire investment strategy. I think it'll be completely additive because on one side, we'll strive for more engagement of real people and real community and real entertainment, whereas AI takes over most of the other parts of our lives and gives us potentially more time and more money. So I think that'll be a net positive. In terms of applications to the real estate side, the team side, media, all of that, technology is the underpinning of everything that we do. I mean, most of the teams make most of their revenue from media contracts. Media is being disrupted incredibly over the last couple of years and will continue to be. So we're very aware of everything going on. We've got incredible partners and friends that focus on the venture and the tech side of sports, and then, outside of sports as well. So we try to keep our ear to the ground, obviously, on everything. I'm excited about the advances it helps on ticket. I mean, we're looking at not just the traditional players, but when you're talking about ticketing or the media or the analytics to make your team on the field better, there's so many things going on. And I'm humbled that we have the opportunity to not only listen to what's going on, but also potentially invest in those companies. There's a lot going on. So I don't, to answer your question, I'm excited about technology and how it changes sports. I don't believe it's going to change sports in terms of how we watch players on the field or on the court, but I think it'll make our experience better, whether we're watching at home or in the stands. And there's a lot of opportunities that people are coming up with incredible ideas every day. So,
For sure, I agree. What role do you see non-traditional sports, maybe like esports, or we're seeing like this boom in paddle and pickleball? How does that kind of factor into what you guys are doing on the real estate side? Is that something you're also looking at?
yeah, so it's interesting. I'm a part of a local group here in Orlando that, is just a group of successful businessmen and women that look at more local options. And they were recently presented with an option to invest in a paddle company. And I kind of joked, it's a great company. The paddle company is a fabulous company. For those that don't know, paddles, booming like pickleball was in the early days, and it was a more mature sport globally. But I kind of joked with the guys here in town that this is probably the seventh or eighth paddle company I've seen in the last, 3 months. And that's nothing against paddle, but all it says is there's going to be some winners and there's going to be a lot of losers. But paddle as a concept has a great foundation. And so we have the opportunity to pick those winners and losers either at a company level or even just integrate it into our projects. And so, on some of our projects, we're absolutely thinking about, it's all about the entertainment, right? It's the stadium, the retail, the restaurants, but we absolutely want to have, the best and brightest pickleball concept or paddle concept. And you even have these multi-sport concepts that are kind of wrapped with more of a social element, like Ballers up in Philadelphia,
Yeah.
where you've got paddle and pickle and God knows what else, and also incredible food and beverage, and it's like a membership club. So there's so many different things happening, but the great part is we're just building the infrastructure to help those folks come in, pick which ones we believe are the best complement to that community, and to bring them into the community, and we house them there.
As we wind down here, man, looking out over the next decade or so, what do you think will be the biggest or most untapped opportunity in sports real estate?
What is the biggest? I mean, just the opportunity of sports real estate. If you look at the TAM, it's over $1 trillion opportunity. So between, the 40 venues that exist today that will need redeveloped in the next 5 to 10 years, all of the expansion of the different teams from USL to MLS to MLB, and they're gonna have a handful, NBA, WNBA, otherwise. You have a huge TAM just in the sense that you need places. And then college athletics,
Yeah.
there's a huge TAM. And I think the opportunity is just core to what I was talking about earlier. It is how do we take the great prototypes that are out there, LA Live and the Deer District and the Battery, and take this enormous TAM across the US, Europe, and even Central America and continue to compound and make those even better. And really, again, it might be a bad example, but it is the next evolution of what I went to in the 90s for my Friday nights and Saturday nights with my friends and that my parents would go to, the mall, the regional mall. How do we twist that and put that upside down and create an amazing experience that is this generation's version of that? And that's the opportunity that we're working on every day.
I love it, man. That's a beautiful analogy. And then lastly, how do you guys define success? What does that equal for Momentous, and what does that equal personally for you?
Success is, so Momentous is our own capital, but then we're also bringing outside capital for the first time. So success at the elementary level is ensuring that we give our investors the best experience and the best returns possible for their investment. But if I go separate from that, that is done by being a great steward to the communities and the municipalities that we work in, being very thoughtful and collaborative, like I mentioned before, with those communities and creating something that's truly different. And then, having success also means, I just kind of said it, but being different. We want to go into these communities and offer something that they don't have. I don't want to be the third or fourth project of the same food hall concept that is there. I want to be different. And that's success for me, is being different, but adding value to the communities. And when you think of Charleston, or you think of Jacksonville, or you think of Tampa, that in 5 to 10 years, though, when somebody says that to you, you think of one of our projects. And I think that would be a huge success.
I love it, Marley. This has been super insightful. Can you let people know where they can learn more about Momentous and also connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, myself and my team are very active on LinkedIn. We try to provide whatever we can in terms of thought leadership on LinkedIn. So feel free to reach out to me there. Obviously, Momentous Sports is the name of our platform, but very happy to talk to anyone that either has interest or just generally curious about what we're working on or the sports landscape. And obviously, following Malcolm, I'll give you a plug, is first and foremost, because you're so thoughtful in covering the entire landscape, and there's so much going on, and it's hard to consume all of that. And so again, super appreciative for everything you do, Malcolm.
My God, appreciate the kind words, appreciate the time.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you.